The most satisfying experience, I would say, by definition, is to let go of dissatisfaction, to exercise your ever available and inherently earned capacity to relax the emotional muscle, the mental tension that I think that we use as a strategy to compel, to discipline ourselves, to move towards something that we were told about in a convincing enough way that we felt like it was worth the effort. And we learned that method from our circumstances that we were born into, because we have only lived in a situation, and maybe not even that many of us we've only lived in this situation for a very short period of time in history, where we have the luxury of considering like survival oriented mindsets, and therefore strategies of how to approach anything in life. Because we're really just modeling what we know has worked well enough, or what we've observed work well enough, and then we try that out ourselves. And it's hard to get creative and think of something completely new if you're not able to get into a state of self-reflection that comes only when I think we kind of run out of purpose. So if you're living in like the jungle, there's no end of emergencies to be addressed. You're either searching for food, watching out for danger, managing what you've taken ownership of. And you know, it's so alive and in every direction. Unless you're like a bear and you become such a successful apex predator, I don't think you'll ever have time to sit and wonder, what am I doing? What am I? Why am I here? What is all of this? And is there a better way to contextualize it and then operate? And the reason I say bears is I read recently that bears are known to sit and observe their surroundings in a way that, as far as anybody can tell, is basically them just taking it all in and having an existential moment. And obviously we're able to do the same thing now because we have dominated our survival needs so much that the only thing stopping most of us from being able to sit down and feel that emptiness of these deep questions is the danger created by other humans. Whether that's your landlord charging rent that's hard to pay, or you have a high intensity job at a big corporation. It's all for the most part arbitrary. It's all optional, kind of. Like, I think most situations, if it weren't for our attachments to our situations and where we believe they are going towards and away from, I think most people would be able to just drop all of it and at least have a few months where they really could just sit there and wonder in a deep way. And I have a few friends that have done that. There was one, he has 3 kids and a wife, and he just decided one day that he was just going to sit on his couch and not do anything until he felt inspired to do it or something like that. And that was his default for like 3 months. And then it ended, resulted in him having some very life-altering epiphanies and reframes of himself and reality. And it was really cool to kind of talk to him about it and see how things changed for him afterwards. So kind of coming back to this thing of threat, danger, purpose, the other side of that is entertainment. We're so able to be entertained 100% of the time that we have available. It seems like it's free. It's so effortless to connect to and engage with what is a very heavy reward based on our brain's way of measuring cost versus reward, which is very interesting. I'm talking about our phones mostly. I think it's very interesting that we have kind of hacked ourselves to feel that our phones cost us nothing and then they provide us a huge amount of value. And this is on a visceral level, a neurochemical level, where if we're to consider it from a just barely higher cognitive abstraction, it's obvious that the cost far outweighs the benefit in most areas for most people. And the really big hidden cost is that we are not taking advantage of the greatest gift of the hyper-abundant situation of society. Say what you want about how abundant you think you are when it comes to money, but you freely access trillions and trillions of dollars of infrastructure every second of every day, and it keeps you safe and protected and mobile in ways that are facilitating the option to go within your consciousness in a way that for most of history, as far as we know, was reserved for 1 in a billion people, I would say. And even then, those people were getting access to the tiniest fraction of education on how to do that and what to look for and so on and so forth. So now anybody at basically any time can do that. That being experience purposelessness, emptiness, boredom, meaninglessness, and do something with that resource. Those feelings and experiences are like unrefined gold. And because they're unrefined and they feel uncomfortable and ugly, we really run away from them and we don't know what to do with them until we do. But there's a reason they're there. And they, you could say, act as like a, maybe the only doorway into the underworld of your own personal hell. A hell that exists, I think, inside of everybody who hasn't gone there to redeem it. Like, if you have like a shadowy trauma programming in you because of something that happened with your relationship with your parents, and through your whole life it causes you to see the world in a really dark way that actually is untrue, like that's hell. And you can go into that and resolve it, and that part of you will leave that mode of expression and enter into something that is heavenly by comparison. And the deepest part of that is this empty hole that, as far as I know, everybody starts out with or develops very early on and spends their entire lives and all of their energy maintaining their anesthetizing neuroses, finding a way to make them functional and operative within the survival game and the status game and the materialism game and the spiritual game, so that they don't have to feel that feeling. Which is ironic, because if you're living under that, it means that you're controlled by that feeling. You're always controlled by that, like the one thing or collection of things that you refuse to look at or address or let go of. It's like the two different expressions of the same function of our system. So this doorway, I think this is a lot of what meditation kind of forces us to accidentally fall into, because for the most part, the instructions are just sit there and just watch what comes up. And there's so many convincingly advertised potential outcomes and benefits that come with that, and none of them are untrue. They're just kind of like candy along the way to reaching that moment where you've conditioned yourself enough to embrace what comes up and face it and let go of what leaves and allow it. That when the really big stuff enters and exits, you can play your role productively. And I think it's almost like, well, one way of saying it is your thinking mind, your interpretive mechanism, it's a contextualizer. And as things come up and down into your conscious and back down into your unconscious, you're offering like context updates, relational definitions of what everything is to you and what you are to it. And if that has any errors that are getting integrated back into the subconscious, then you're going to compulsively move through life in a state of unalterable trigger whenever something comes up that matches that relational programming. So it doesn't matter how you act towards it exteriorly, in the sense that, like, if danger happens and you need to act to avoid it, then you still act to avoid it. And I say this because at the same time, you can still respond to it internally in how you relate to it in a way that contextualizes safety. It's not your mind's job to create fear. Your body does that already. It will feel the fear response and it will act. If you layer on top of that a narrative that is scary, then how do I say it? I guess like a narrative that mentally re-emphasizes the fear. Because, maybe I don't know how to say this. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about here. Let me think. Well, I guess the truth is we don't have the ability to really contextualize things in a definitive way with the amount of information that we have access to. So when we apply a very hard and emotionally charged conclusion to something that happens, like, let's say like there was like a near miss, like you would have died if it hit you, and you have a really strong emotional response to that, and you carry that emotional response with you, and basically you're applying a like peer-reviewed paper of like, this is how it is, to this moment where you had the tiniest amount of data through your experience and what stood out to you because of what was most emphasized by what happened, which was super relevant in that moment. But in doing so, anytime an experience happens which has an infinite amount of data that matches that little sliver, your body will take your conclusion and superimpose that result on the new experience, and it will activate those emotions to protect you from that experience in the same way, under the false impression that it requires that same level of intensity of response. So, anyway, get bored. It's a privilege. It's a treasure. Feel the feelings you really don't want to feel. And let them be safe. That's what I'm trying to get at.